They appear overnight. No one reports seeing them arrive. No one hears them form. Only the pattern left behind. Precise. Ordered. Deliberate. Some are made, proven, repeated. But not all of them are easily explained, because some don't behave the same way. They've been studied, measured, and still no clear answer. They continue to appear across different fields, returning over time, documented, and then left without an answer. The patterns remain, and so does the question: what are we really looking at? Long before they were given a name, there were traces. Not patterns like these. Not yet. Something else.
Flying saucers, the most controversial subject of our time. Like most controversial subjects, there are two sides.
In 1966, near Tully in Queensland, a farmer named George Pedley reported seeing an object rise from Horseshoe Lagoon. Moments later, he found an impression in the reeds, around 10 meters across, flattened, pressed down, as if something had been there and then wasn't. In 1965, in Valençol in southern France, a farmer described an object landing in his field. After it departed, marks remained. Compressed soil, disturbed vegetation. Surrounding plants appeared affected. The ground itself, altered. The case was investigated, documented, and never fully resolved.
On one hand, the people gathered here say that we ourselves are on the threshold of the invasion of outer space, so why not accept our stories that there's life on other planets and that space foreigners have already landed here on Earth. But on the other hand, our government, through Project Blue Book, debunked saucer sightings. Now, these sightings, they say, were based on hallucinations, reflections, mirages, inversions, weather balloons, and out-and-out lies. Now, this convention here at Giant Rock is obviously one-sided. Flying saucers and out-of-this-world travelers are real to them.
In 1973, in Mississippi, two men reported an encounter along the Pascagoula River. They described being taken aboard a craft, examined, and returned.
It was kind of like a humming noise. Just one of them made it like hum, just like that. And the only one I seen that made it, just the one that made it. The rest of them I didn't hear nothing. Another face or nothing I couldn't see, distinctly, because I was at the point where I passed out.
In the days that followed, accounts emerged from the surrounding area, including reports of unusual marks near the riverbank. Impressions.
They went over and seen a spot on the ground where this thing had landed.
That Friday, I spoke with some of my friends and said, hey, do y'all want to go see where the aliens landed? Would y'all like to go see that? You know, I know where it is. So we got out there to where the pier was. We kind of scouted around on the ground, went out on the pier, you know, we're looking for anything that, you know, may have been left by an alien, and we decided, you know, well, where did it land? We decided, well, let's go out here and look in the weeds and the tall grass and stuff, you know. Made our way through, and I'll just never forget. It was just the feeling when we first saw it. We were like, whoa, what is this? And it was about a 30-foot, 25, 30-foot wide circle of nothing all of a sudden. It was just flat. I've never been able to imagine what kind of machine could do that and leave nothing behind. You know, it's not like it was just pushed over, like something just landed on top of it.
Difficult to verify, but consistent with a familiar pattern. Something seen, something experienced, and something left behind.
They assemble under the burning sun to talk about the one thing they have in common, the belief in flying saucers. Most of these people claim to have seen unidentified flying objects. Others claim to have talked with space strangers. All of them agree that flying saucers can come from only one place, the vast unknown.
Across France in 1954, and in cases across the United States, similar traces were reported. Objects close to the ground, and afterwards, physical effects, depressions, scorch marks, disturbed vegetation, sometimes explained, sometimes dismissed. In each case, contained. But taken together, they suggest something else. Not shapes, not designs, but contact. Something arriving, interacting, and leaving.
The fact or fiction, truth or lies, the decision rests with you. Whichever way you think, time alone will provide the answer.
By the late 1970s, in the fields of southern England, reports had begun to surface. Simple formations, returning. But over time, the nature of the traces begins to change, less like isolated events, more like something repeating. Not in swamps, not beside riverbanks, but in open fields. In the south of England, reports began to surface. Simple formations, areas where crops had been flattened, cleanly, deliberately, often overnight. At first, they were explained as natural, referred to as wind circles, the result of localized air currents, pressing crops into the ground, in simple circular forms. And for a time, that explanation was widely accepted. The formations were small, contained, consistent with what might be expected. But not all of them, because gradually they began to change, becoming more defined, more structured, appearing more frequently. There is no single agreed first case, no clear beginning, only a point where the reports become harder to ignore, not as isolated impressions, but as something repeating, recognizable, repeatable, a pattern, not just in the field, but in how it kept returning. By the early 1980s, the reports had begun to build. Across Wiltshire and Hampshire, farmers described unusual formations in their fields, appearing without clear cause. At first, they were noted locally, brief mentions in regional newspapers, described as wind circles. Unusual, but not yet remarkable. But as the reports continued, they began to draw wider attention. By the late 1980s, national newspapers, including the Daily Mirror and The Guardian, had begun covering the phenomenon. Television coverage followed, framing the formations for a wider audience. Segments on BBC News and current affairs programs, bringing images of the fields into homes across the country.
Scientists are still baffled over the mystery of corn circles in fields in southern England. Anything from whirlwinds to UFOs have been suggested as the cause of the strange shapes. Now a regular watch has begun to try and see exactly what does cause the marks.
What had once been local was now visible, discussed, questioned, and increasingly repeated. A name began to settle around them: crop circles. Not a single event, but a phenomenon now being watched.
Following on Daytime Live this series is the search for what's causing the beautiful and intriguing crop circles. These are flattened circles in fields of wheat and other crops which have been occurring in increasing numbers across central southern England. Over 240 were discovered last year, but there's still no satisfactory explanation.
By the late 1980s, the formations had begun to change, and the phenomenon itself was beginning to draw wider attention, even appearing in international coverage, including reports on CBS in the United States.
In the misty valleys of southern England, where mysterious circular formations from a lost civilization remain, where ancient burial mounds and strange antiquities dot the countryside, there lurks a new riddle which confounds scientist and citizen alike. The mystery is the appearance of hundreds of these circles, some of them 30 feet across, where crops have been perfectly spun into the ground with an eerie precision that has left people scratching their heads.
Crop circles have been appearing on the summer landscape for centuries, some only feet across, others bigger than soccer pitches, and they take the most intricate shapes. This new formation in Wiltshire has drawn scientists and spectators from around the world, each with their own theory on what created it.
I'm a proponent of the UFO alien visitation.
You can call me a skeptic, but I believe it must be man-made.
Perhaps nature is trying to tell us, to look after the world in a better way.
No longer just circles, but multiple, grouped, arranged into connected forms. What had once been simple was becoming structured. By the early 1990s, clear geometric designs had begun to appear.
I feel intuitively that they are some sort of communication from the Earth.
I think higher beings. If somebody tells you that they know the answer to this, forget it.
As the formations became more visible, so did the attention, and with it, an explanation.
For people in this twilight convoy of cars heading for a Wiltshire hillside, crop watching is an obsession. This group spends night after night in all weathers believing flying saucers might be the answer.
I have seen UFOs, and so I don't need persuading. I've seen these objects in the sky.
Are you looking for little green men or what?
No, no, not little green men or women.
I believe that the UFO phenomena and the crop circles are totally connected, and it's to reawaken an ancient knowledge that we've forgotten.
But for many who live on the land, especially farmers, the explanation is not extraterrestrial, it's human and destructive. Phil Fiddler showed ITN a new cascade of circles in his wheat field.
If an alien's going to come from another planet, it's not going to land in the middle of a crop. Why wouldn't it knock on my door? Why land here?
Exactly, says the granddaddy of hoaxes, Doug Bauer.
In 1991, two men came forward, Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley. They claimed responsibility for many of the formations that had appeared across southern England.
He says any idea of mystery is rubbish, and he should know. Doug's been responsible for hundreds of hoaxes.
It's only flattened corn. I mean, how on earth can you fool the whole world, which we've done, with just some flattened corn?
According to their account, they had been creating them for years. Beginning in 1978, working through the 1980s, undetected. Though aspects of their account were not always consistent, details around when they began, how many formations they had made, and how frequently they were able to create them were described in broad terms. Their inspiration, the Tully incident in Australia in 1966. Using simple tools, wooden planks, rope, working at night.
All you have to do to make this amazing mystery of the 20th century is this. Crop circles are just an interesting diversion. They're very pretty, but from the viewpoint of science, they have no significance whatsoever.
This is the latest crop circle to make an appearance in the fields of Wiltshire. Even those who believe there are mysterious forces at work here agree that this is probably man-made. Another summer attraction for the tourists, but it is infuriating the farmers. Tim Carson has seen 5 crop circles appear on his farm over the past few months. Nothing to do with the extraterrestrials, he says. It's all down to hoaxes, and he's fed up.
They call themselves artists, crop artists. I call them vandals. And if I ever catch them, they'd be done for criminal damage and trespass.
For many, it was enough. The mystery, it seemed, had an answer. And if some could be made, then perhaps all of them could. But their account did not cover everything. And as the formations continued, questions remained. Not just about how they were made, but whether every formation could be made the same way. What began as isolated, basic impressions had become large-scale, highly structured designs. Across Wiltshire, open farmland stretches across rolling countryside. Wide, exposed fields, broken only by hedgerows and distant ridgelines. A landscape marked by prehistoric monuments. Within this same landscape, the formations continued to appear. On July 7, 1996, in a field near Stonehenge, a new formation was discovered. Discovered in the early hours and documented soon after. Those who first recorded it found the formation already complete. A precise pattern laid cleanly across the field. A fractal design laid out across the ground, extending over approximately 300 meters, composed of over 100 individual circles. The pattern resembled a mathematical fractal known as Julia set, a repeating structure generated from a simple equation, laid out with consistent spacing, maintaining its structure across the entire formation, and reported to have appeared within a single night. Across the same region, complex formations continued to appear, year after year in the same fields, increasing in scale and detail. In the years that followed, the scale continued to increase. Formations spanned entire hillsides, hundreds of individual elements, patterns repeated with precision across wide areas of farmland. By 2001, at Milk Hill in Wiltshire, one of the largest formations ever recorded appeared, covering an area of roughly 300 meters, composed of 409 individual circles, appearing within a single night. The question was no longer simply what they were, but how they were made. How long would it take to plan, to measure, to construct designs of that scale, with that level of precision, often without being seen, without leaving clear traces of entry? Methods existed. They had been demonstrated. But as the designs became more complex and the scale increased, the time required became harder to ignore. Not impossible, but increasingly difficult to explain. And the explanation became harder to hold. As the formations were examined more closely, attention shifted from the shapes themselves to the crops beneath them. In some cases, the plants were flattened, but not broken, bent close to the ground and laid in a consistent direction. In some formations, the crops appeared layered, folded in different directions, crossed over one another in a structured pattern. In fields such as Eastfield, patterns have been observed where the crop lies in alternating directions across the design. In other cases, the crops were crushed, stems snapped, pressed into the soil. The kind of damage that could be produced mechanically, by boards, by foot. Two types of formation appearing across the same landscape. Some consistent with human construction, others less easily explained at first glance. But no single pattern presented in every case. No consistent set of characteristics that applied to all formations. The evidence varied, and the more it was examined, the clearer it became. This was not one phenomenon with one explanation. The question shifted. What could be causing them? One explanation was human. Planned, measured, executed in the dark, working along tram lines to move through fields without leaving obvious tracks. And in many cases, this explanation was confirmed.
This was the cause of the initial excitement, fresh crop circles at dawn after a night of mysterious flashing lights. For some hours, scientists from Operation Blackbird high on the Wiltshire Hills really believed they captured on video the actual formation of a crop circle half a mile away, right under their noses. Too good to be true? Yes. Some hours later, when they belatedly walked to the scene, they found a couple of Ouija boards and crude wooden crosses. They'd been had. The vague video images they recorded were of humans, not aliens.
We had seen lights which we could not easily account for early this morning, and that we were further analysing that data.
It was almost instantaneously clear that it was a hoax.
This realization came too late to stop a gathering of the curious. The news had, after all, been flashed around the planet. There was disappointment in the air.
No jolly green giant.
No jolly green giant.
I'm disappointed. Oh, dear, dear, dear. I don't think it's a hoax. I don't
You
know
still
how they
believe
could
it?
do it? Yes, I don't know how they could get it like that.
They, whoever they were, could have got it like that by simply sticking a pole in the ground and walking around it in ever-increasing circles, trampling the corn as they went. The circles were not perfect, the straight lines a disgrace to anyone from outer space. Just perhaps a result of spending a little too long at the local pub.
But even within this explanation, questions remained. About scale, about speed, about how many formations could realistically be produced without detection. Another explanation looked into natural forces, unusual weather patterns, localized winds flattening crops into circular shapes. Ideas explored particularly in the early years, but difficult to apply consistently.
Crop scientist Dr. Jeremy Sweet thinks the creative energy is simply the weather.
A sort of downward thermal, which makes the air come down fairly fast in a sort of whirlwind effect and flattens the crop as it goes down.
A third possibility looked into the landscape itself, not to human activity, but to the ground beneath it. Subtle variations in geology, changes in soil composition. Some researchers reported localized anomalies, compass readings that shifted slightly within formations, magnetic measurements that differed from the surrounding field, observed, but not consistently reproduced.
Finding the answer, though, is the major preoccupation of circle investigators. Paul Vigay believes the answer lies in electrical pulses coming from the ground.
So I'll get into a circle and I'll get an indication of an energy there or no energy.
Others noted minor variations in soil and signs of plant stress. Effects that could be measured, but not linked to a single cause.
The wind, the sun, and other elements are also part of the mystery surrounding ancient circles of stone. Most of Britain's crop circles occur within 50 miles of Stonehenge. Could there be a mystical connection?
First one. Second.
Dowser Dennis
Third
Wheatley
one.
thinks there is.
Positive.
He claims the movement of his
Fourth one.
dowsing rod shows crop circles have
four.
energy lines and
Negative.
earth spirits
If I go beyond
believed
it,
in by
I get
Stone
nothing.
Age man.
Attention also turned to location. Some formations appearing near ancient sites, stone circles, burial mounds, historic pathways. From there, another idea emerged, that these places might be connected. Lines drawn across the landscape, linking distant landmarks, often referred to as ley lines. Unverified, difficult to define, and not supported by consistent physical evidence, but frequently referenced in attempts to map the phenomenon. But they were not the only explanations. And then another idea, that some formations might not be environmental, not entirely human, but intentional.
The phenomena itself is well beyond hoaxers, it's well beyond human beings. We are looking at extraterrestrial or indeed simply a level of nature, high nature, we don't understand.
In recent years, discussion around unidentified aerial phenomena has shifted from speculation to investigation. Government reports released, military encounters documented, the language changing, less dismissive, more measured. The possibility of non-human intelligence no longer treated entirely as fiction, but as a question. considered in public. Within that broader conversation, the formations take on a different context, and the possibility, however remote, that some may originate from beyond our own.
Oh. Oh! What is it?
It's disappearing. What the hell?
Oh my God, what was that?
Patterns placed, structured, designed. Alongside the formations, there have been reports. Accounts from witnesses who described lights over fields at night. Small, bright, sometimes moving in controlled paths. Silent, hovering or traveling low across the landscape. In some cases, seen in the same locations where formations were later found.
Massive blasts of light, orbs of light hovering at the side of the field. These are things that to us are inexplicable, we can't explain them. And so I'm completely open to the fact that even if the formation we've made is man-made, we feel that they're still genuine because they seem to catalyse other paranormal events. I mean, there has been footage of UFOs lifting out of crop circles we've made.
Colin Andrews is one of the world's leading experts on crop circles. The Rockefeller Foundation has given him $1 million to investigate them. His own interest is in the magnetic field surrounding the circles. Colin thinks 80% of crop circles are man-made. The rest could come from outer space.
It's the gut feeling based upon an awful lot of data. It leads me into lots of trouble, of course, because I'm fringing on the edge of saying perhaps extraterrestrial. But one is forced, when you look at complex geometries, to place that as a possibility.
Trying to send us a message.
It's conceivable.
The only certainty is that between now and harvest, more and more crop circles will appear. And whatever causes them, at least they can be enjoyed as landscape art.
As the formations continued to appear, attention reached beyond the fields. Questions were asked in Parliament. In 1989, the government was pressed for an explanation. One response suggested that at least some formations could be the result of wind and natural conditions. Another made clear that no official military involvement was known. Brief answers, limited replies, but no sustained inquiry. No dedicated program. No long-term effort to examine the phenomenon in depth. And so the subject remained partially acknowledged, but largely set aside. Seen, questioned, recorded, but never fully pursued. The pattern was not limited to the United Kingdom. Crop formations were reported in other countries, including the United States. But there, they appeared differently. Less frequent, less concentrated, scattered across wider areas rather than returning to the same locations. Often treated as isolated events, reported locally, investigated briefly, sometimes attributed to hoaxes, sometimes to natural causes, and often left without a clear conclusion. Earlier, U.S. Air Force studies such as Project Blue Book had examined reports of unexplained aerial activity, including cases where physical traces were left on the ground, flattened vegetation, circular impressions. The program ran for nearly 2 decades, before closing in 1969. By the time similar markings began to appear more widely in open farmland in the years that followed, no comparable effort was established. Instead, they remained outside formal investigation, handled individually, then set aside. For some, that absence of attention became a question in itself. If the phenomenon was widespread and repeatedly documented, why was it not studied more closely? Why was it not taken further? From that gap, other interpretations emerged. The suggestion that something was being dismissed rather than examined, that certain cases might have drawn closer attention than was ever made public. Ideas of withheld information, of quiet monitoring, of official reluctance to engage openly with the subject. Not confirmed, not evidenced in any consistent way, but shaped by the lack of clear answers, and sustained by the phenomenon itself, continuing without resolution. And in that respect, the response was not unique. Across both the United Kingdom and the United States, the pattern remained consistent. Acknowledged, briefly addressed, but never pursued as a subject in its own right. Across the years, many formations have been explained, demonstrated, recreated, claimed. Simple circles laid down by hand. More complex designs planned and constructed with increasing precision. And in many cases, those explanations are sufficient. But not all formations are so easily accounted for. Some remain unclear. Not because they appear impossible, but because the available explanations do not fully account for every detail. Large formations reported within limited time frames, fields left undisturbed one evening and altered by morning, often discovered without context, no one present to see them take shape. No record of when the process began or how long it took. In these cases, there is no single explanation that can be applied consistently. Some may be human, some may be natural, some remain uncertain. And it is in that uncertainty that the phenomenon continues. What began as isolated reports in a handful of fields has spread far beyond a single place. Formations have appeared across Europe, North America, Australia, parts of Asia. Different landscapes, different crops, but the same forms reappearing.
If an alien's going to come from another planet, it's not going to land in the middle of a crop. Why wouldn't it knock on my door?
Often explained, recreated, attributed to human hands. And in many cases, those explanations are convincing. But not every account fits as cleanly. Across decades, thousands of formations have been documented. Most can be explained. Some cannot be resolved with the same certainty. And even if one of them falls outside those explanations, then it cannot be dismissed in the same way as the rest. Not because it proves anything, but because explaining most does not explain all. And one unanswered case is enough to leave the question open.